All right, everyone. Welcome back to The Great Retention with Kamber Parker Bowden, sponsored by Generational Performance Solutions. I'm Kamber, founder and CEO of GPS, where we bring you strategies to cultivate a high-performing and committed team in a rapidly changing workplace. Whether you're looking to enhance cross-generational communication or navigate generational dynamics in the office, you've come to the right place. Today, I am truly honored to have Mike Simonds, President and CEO at TriNet, joining us today from Portland, Maine. Mike has been a consultant at McKinsey in his career, the COO of Unum, holds an MBA from Harvard Business School, and has been at the helm of TriNet since 2024. My story about how I met Mike actually started at the beginning of my career when I met him during week one of my first job at Unum. I don't even know if you remember that, Mike. It's been so long.
I remember.
A few years later, a mutual connection, Howard Einstein, reconnected us after hearing about my journey post-Unum. Howard thought Mike might be interested in my story as well, and he has been a true supporter of my business ever since. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It really means a lot that you are spending time out of your very busy schedule to talk about generations in the workplace. You have had a very robust career, and I really am excited to dig into some of these topics today. So as we get started, we're going to go through a lightning round. So in a couple of sentences or less, try to answer the following questions. I know it can be hard sometimes because I always want to learn more, but we're going to stick to this lightning round. What is something that is not on your resume?
Well, I'd say the thing I'm most proud of, probably the most important thing in my life that's not on my resume, is my wife, Ruby, and I had our 30th wedding anniversary last year. And, I've had the opportunity to recruit some great people to the organizations I've been a part of, but my all-time greatest recruiting job was somehow to convince Ruby to marry me back when I was in between my sophomore and junior years in college.
Wow. Congratulations. 30 years. That's amazing. If you were not in the industry you're currently in, what would you be doing?
I think I would love to be involved in schools and education. And so, probably, be an administrator or a principal of a school. I just have personally experienced, but through myself and my own kind of education, but also my kids. I've got 4 boys that are kind of come through college at this point, and the impact that a really good teacher in a really good school can have for a really long time in your life. So I'd love to be a part of that.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me, knowing your personality and just how you mentor people throughout their careers. That's not surprising. It's also funny because one of my interviews that I've had today on the podcast is with an administrator who works in the school system here in Greenville, South Carolina. And so it's just interesting. I just spoke to somebody who was sharing, that she actually does just that. What is the best professional advice you've received from a mentor?
So much good advice, and I know, Kamber, the same's for you, but a lot of the success I've had goes back to mentors and people that took an interest in me and took a risk. And so it's hard to narrow it down, but I'll tell you one that stuck with me. And it was the CEO of the company I was with at the time. And we were walking down the hall, and I was a little bit junior at that point. So it's kind of a big deal. And, he had a quick conversation with somebody that was walking through. And then after, it was just the 2 of us. And he looked at me and he goes, Mike, I know you'd agree with me that leaders could never have a bad day. And I was like, at that time I was like, yep, Tom, absolutely. That's right. They can never have a bad day. And then as I walked away, I thought, that's crazy. Everybody has bad days. Mm-hmm. But, the more I reflected on it, the more I realized it was like, he wasn't saying you weren't going to have bad days. Everybody has tough days. But how you show up when you're a leader really matters. And I've always tried to sort of remember that piece of advice, to say, when you're in that leadership role, it's not about you. It's about the people that you're working with, and how you show up really matters.
Yeah, well said. And then lastly, for our lightning round, what is the best business book recommendation you've ever received?
I mean, I feel like it's a layup here that it's got to be Generation Advantage, Kamber.
I did not pay Mike to say that, folks who are listening.
If you haven't seen it, you got to check it out, folks.
Thank you. Well, any other non-generational advantage related books that
I never read business books, so
do you?
That's it. I mean, honestly, I can tell you, it's the only business book I've read in the last 18 months, 2 years.
Well, that's a true honor. Thank you, Mike.
Got it.
Let's jump right in to our topics that we're going to cover today, which first off, we're talking about leading across multiple generations, which you have done for the last several decades. You are currently the president and CEO of TriNet right now, but you've been an operational leader across multiple industries throughout your career. So you've put in some time understanding different generations and different career stages. So let's set the stage by talking about what you have learned in your leadership journey when it comes to navigating generational dynamics. And feel free to also share a little bit more about TriNet right now, just so people who are maybe not familiar that are listening can understand.
Sure. Yeah. Maybe I'll start there, Kamber.
Yeah,
So
please.
TriNet is it's like an HR solutions company, and we focus on small to mid-sized businesses. And our job is basically to help take care of all your people processes. So you as a client can really focus on your core business. So that's everything from payroll to benefits to HR to compliance. And it's one of the great pleasures of the work, in addition to the 3,500 plus colleagues that we have, is this opportunity to work with entrepreneurs like yourself that are starting businesses, have big dreams, and what can we do to support their business by taking great care of their people. And then, your question about working with different generations, for sure, and I guess, and I know you'd agree with this, for me, I always start with actually the sort of a fundamental idea that there's a lot more that unites us than divides us, and that
Correct.
we all as humans and as professionals have a lot in common around, wanting to be successful, wanting to provide for our loved ones, to be seen as valuable, a key part of a team, trustworthy. So there's a lot of beautiful differences amongst people, but there's also, and I think a good place to start, there's a lot in common. But there absolutely is differences. And I got my first management job when I was in my very early 20s, and my team was pretty much sort of, middle 40-year-olds, and tended to be women. Actually, in the industry I was in, it was a lot of women, and which was great. But the way that I sort of thought about things, the way I communicated, wasn't necessarily exactly the way that they did. And so I learned pretty early on to be a really good listener. I learned that the hard way by doing too much talking early on in my managerial career. But I learned to do a lot more listening, to engage, get to know people, ask open-ended questions, and really kind of understand what motivates people. And it can be quite different. And I think having that idea of sort of come from a place of humility, recognize as a leader, it's not really about you, it's about them, and sort of what's going to be most effective in helping them achieve the things that they might not otherwise be able to achieve if they weren't part of the team. So that I learned that by making some mistakes, talking too much, and learned to listen a little bit more.
Yeah. I really love there's a lot more that unites us than divides us. And I absolutely agree with that. That's kind of the whole purpose of what we do, is let's demystify those generational differences that we just label. Like, I think we have to get away from labeling generations and making assumptions, and let's focus on, there are differences, right? Like, there's naturally going to be differences, but let's focus on what kind of unites us versus pushes us apart. And so what I like about your response, Mike, is that you aren't talking about specific generational motivators or specific, communication styles. You're just saying these are humans. And so if you ask them open-ended questions, if you're curious and you come from a place of humility, like, no matter how old you are as a leader, that's going to resonate across generations. That's what I'm hearing you say.
Totally. I get it's exactly it.
Great. Well, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic right now, which is AI. We're currently seeing major changes across industries because of the rising influence of AI, like the elimination of entry-level jobs. In fact, CNBC reported at the end of last year, in 2025, that entry-level roles have declined about 35% since January of 2023. As we keep seeing less need for humans in the workforce, what role do HR professionals, both from an enterprise level all the way to small businesses, play in the future-proofing of their organizations?
Yeah, it is the topic du jour. You cannot escape it. It is AI from every angle, right? And we at TriNet, we just did some research in the small to mid-sized business community with the Harvard Business Review, and it just sort of underscored that point. It was like 76% of these SMBs were feeling like they needed to increase and plan to increase the use of AI over the coming year, but less than 20% of them felt like they were prepared to really drive that increased utilization, and they had the right processes and the right skills in place to do it. So I think it's fair to say like a lot of us are sort of figuring this out. And the nature of it with these Gen AI models, it tends to displace some of the activities that are a bigger part of an entry level versus a mid career kind of role. And we definitely, I would agree with your point. We've seen across the industry a slowdown in hiring in entry level jobs. And I kind of get it. It's sort of a logical in the short term strategy is, how do I deploy this new technology? How do I get a little more efficient, a little bit faster? I do think in the midterm, not even the long term, I think a lot of organizations are going to look around and wonder, what happened to their talent pipeline. And so, one of the things that makes a lot of sense to us is to flip our thinking a little bit, and instead of sort of thinking about, what hiring might I not have to do because of AI, it's sort of flip it around and say, what's a higher, better use of this talent that I continue to bring in? And what could it enable from a growth perspective in particular? And so at TriNet, one of the things we've done is actually significantly increased our hiring off of college campuses. And so we started with our sales program and said, hey, let's bring people in early. And frankly, the AI tools that remove a lot of friction out of the prospecting and selling process make these entry level folks much more productive, which drives more sales, which drives more growth, which creates more professional development opportunities. So I don't fault some of the thinking that I see around the business community, which has led to a really tough job market for recent grads. But on the other hand, I think a lot of times when people are going right and everybody's going right, it's a good time to at least think about going left. And I try to we're sort of going left and increasing our entry level hiring.
Yeah, I love your recommendation to kind of just shift the mindset about this a little bit, because where I'm standing, we believe that what you just described is a generational issue, right? The fact that we have so many entry-level roles that are decreasing. What does that mean for the Gen Zers, future Gen Alpha members who enter the workplace, right? They're going to, where are they coming into? Are they coming into middle management? Are they coming in as an individual contributor who really has essentially missed kind of what we're saying is the first 5 years of work, where you're supposed to pay your dues, put in that time? And I like what you're saying. It's shift the mindset to like the sales program. If this can help drive more productivity for those early sales employees, great. We have to shift the mindset, and we have to understand that the first 5 years of work is just going to look drastically different than your first 5 years of work or my first 5 years of work. It's just going to be different. Do you have anything to share or add on to that?
Yeah, my first job, I was a temporary administrative assistant. I ended up being the chief operating officer of the company, but that was my first job. And to be honest with you, I learned a fair amount, but I didn't learn it particularly efficiently. I mean, there's only so much you learn from copying and filing and typing and the things I was doing. So I think it's an amazing opportunity, and I think it's a good thing, because I think it's a lot of the components of the work that, frankly, there's learning, but it's not the steep curve and the value add learning that's getting pulled out first. And so concentrating on things like, how do I build my influence and communication skills? How's my sort of critical thinking and problem solving? The things that are uniquely human and that come with time in those entry level jobs. Maybe if you're taking some of the mundane work and automating it, it just helps. It helps folks jump that curve a bit faster.
Yeah, great point. So you've already mentioned that TriNet works heavily with small and mid-sized businesses, which often have the benefit of quicker adaptability because of their size. How do you think smaller businesses can leverage this advantage right now while also avoiding change fatigue with their team members? Alternatively, how can larger organizations handle change? So, I'm asking about change management right now, which is, I would say, probably the second topic du jour that everybody is kind of focusing on right now. So how do you do that in your own teams? And then how are you seeing your team kind of empower the clients to manage change effectively right now?
Totally. Yeah, and if you look in the markets today, there's a lot of pessimism around hiring in general. And, companies that are, I think about software companies, for instance, that have a revenue model that's based on seats in the enterprise customers that they have. And it's been a tough go because of this AI trade and this dynamic. And I think in general, to your kind of the way you open the question, I would bet on the small to mid-sized business. They tend to be at the edge. They're the first, most adaptable, quickest to move. And yeah, honestly, in a pretty flat job market, you're seeing new business starts really take off. And that's, I think, people recognizing that sort of the power of the technology and frankly, just, jump on ChatGPT and you can learn how to start a business pretty fast, actually. Mm-hmm. So new business starts are, I think, a really a good sign of what's to come, which is more innovation in that SMB community and a very vibrant embrace of AI and other technologies as they come. Mm-hmm. But yeah, that means a lot of change, both for the small enterprise and for the big enterprises, because AI is definitely driving a lot of transformation across the size spectrum. And I don't think there's like a magic formula for sort of how do you strike the right balance, but things that I've observed to be pretty effective. I think the first is the things that you do, the tools that you use, like technology, they're always going to be changing. And I think you want to kind of come back to what's your purpose as a firm, and that's what you want your team to really anchor to. What do we exist to do here? What are we trying to accomplish? What's the good that we bring into the world? And the more that people, keep that in the back of their mind as other things around them change, it's really helpful, I think, to have that anchor to come back to, that the work is important and it's worth the change if we can find a way to do it better and to do it more holistically. Yeah, I think the second one is like, you got to be close to your people. And, I think, we talked about entry-level jobs, but as a CEO, I can tell you AI frees up a lot of time for me too, And so what do I use that time for? And if there's two winners in terms of where that time gets allocated, one's with clients and the second is with our colleagues and with people and understanding, where they're at. Because I think the closer you are to folks, one, it's going to inform your judgment, but two, like when you communicate changes, you can put it in context because you know what people are working with every single day. I think the last one is like, look, you also got to recognize that there's a pace that is digestible. So thinking about how you sequence things, and thinking about like, how do you push so that, change is like a muscle. You do need to stress it, but at some point it sort of breaks from being a productive stress, e.g. it's getting stronger and more resilient, to sort of a little bit of a destructive. That's where injury comes, to use the physical analogy. So I think kind of anchor back to the purpose, make sure you stay close to your team, and then think about the pace and the sequencing of the change and keep it as a constructive stress. Those would be three things I think about.
Yeah, thank you. I really like that analogy. I think that's one that is really digestible too. People can understand it's like, oh, well, we don't want an injury, right? So how do you flex that muscle and kind of test it without getting to that point? And something that I think we're just going to continue to see companies struggle with, right? Because there's just constant change. Like I often hear now it's like, nothing's ever going to move this slowly ever again. And so
that's right.
As a leader, you have to keep in mind all of those tools that you just listed. I want to jump ahead to one question because you talked about being close to your people. And one of our recent reports, we found that Gen Z and millennials specifically noted wanting mentorship from Gen X and baby boomers, but didn't necessarily have one. I think it was about 60% actually want access to a mentor but don't have one. And then when I talk to Gen X and baby boomers, they're like, we want to mentor, we want to pass down that knowledge. So there's a disconnect here. And I just know you to be such a giving leader. Like, you jumped right in when Howard introduced us, and I just thought that was so amazing. And even in my time at Unum, I saw it. You were that way with so many young leaders and emerging leaders. So I'd love to hear your perspective on advice that you can give business leaders looking to increase mentorship in their organizations, because you just said it yourself, like you've got to be close to your people. So obviously there's a strategic element here, but I also have to believe that this is also coming from like the good of your heart because you see the value in this and also maybe enjoy it a little bit. So just tell us a little bit about your experience as a mentor and what you would tell other leaders who are listening that just have no idea where to start.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would just start with like, if you're not mentoring younger folks, then you're missing out. And you can come at it just purely from a sort of a personal investment, because for all the reasons we talked about. I mean, you've got young professionals coming out and into the workforce, and they've really only thought about the learning curve enabled by AI, to go back to that topic. And so having sort of digitally native, AI native folks coming in, as someone that has been in the workforce for a long time, it is really helpful to have that reverse mentor. And, there's people that are going to help you think and push you differently. I also think, like, as a leader, it's sort of a really simple concept, Kamber, but you can look at your day and there's going to be a whole series of interactions and meetings that they're going to be good, they're going to be important, but they're going to drain your bucket, right? In terms of your energy level. And I've always found that interacting with young leaders and people that have great values, great ambition, want to learn, as like a fill the bucket kind of activity. Like, joining you on this podcast, I'll come out of this interaction with you with more energy than I came into it. So I'm talking about, like, if I had to sell it, I feel like I could sell being a mentor all day, every day. And but I agree with the disconnect, and I'm going to be this guy to say, I think, post-COVID, sort of the rapid acceleration of people just not physically being together in a professional environment at the same degree of frequency has definitely impacted, the quality and frequency of mentorship. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean it can't happen. It just means that you need to be more deliberate about it. And so that would be my kind of encouragement to leaders and people that care about this topic, is think things like those intersections that maybe happened a little bit more haphazardly and naturally when we were bumping into each other in the same building on a regular basis. They can still happen, but you got to be deliberate about establishing those connections.
Absolutely. And a quick final question there on mentorship. Do you think structured or non-structured mentorship is the way to go, or does it depend?
I think it really depends on what you're trying to get out of it. I do think it's a very helpful thing to go into it with a goal. And I always look to the mentee to say, what do you want to get out of these interactions? What can I help you with? And I think to the degree that there's a little bit of specificity there, it really helps to shape the interaction. Mm-hmm. But there's a balance to be struck. I think sometimes it gets a little bit overly structured, and then it takes a little bit of the spontaneity out of it.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Thank you. Because that was one of my, I think, most exciting topics that I had for you to talk about today was mentorship, because you just do it really well and you're a champion for younger workers. So thank you from, on behalf of the emerging leader at workforce. It really does mean a lot. As we wrap up our interview, we've got a few more questions. So just being mindful of time, tell me a little bit about how employee benefits are changing in 2026 and where do you see them going in the future? So what are employees across generations opting into, and is it different cross-generationally? Just being an HR solutions partner, what are you seeing from this space?
Yeah, I'd say it definitely continues to evolve. Number one benefit across all generations is still paid time off and flexibility. I would say as you get to the younger generations, that becomes even more important to them. So it's both the amount and then the flexibility. On the health side, we've seen mental health as a resource and a benefit become more important again overall and more acutely important to younger generations. And then I think in general, we've seen like over a couple of decades now, a movement away from a one size fits all set of benefits to just more choice amongst the employee base. And I only see that increasing as technology and AI and they sort of enables a more informed employee and enables like more mass customization down to the individual. I think we'll see more of that.
Yeah, great. I not necessarily surprised about the PTO and flex piece. I am surprised that that is consistent across all generations. So I'm not sure if our listeners and viewers know that necessarily. So thank you for providing that. And then mental health resources that I've continued to see is just really strong on the young professional interest side. But it's interesting to me because I think I hear so often, young people, like they're the mental health group, like they're the ones who keep bringing mental health to the scene. And I'm like, every generation needs these resources.
I totally agree with that. And I will tell you that my belief is that the younger generations had a really positive impact around, removing stigma around mental health and the importance of it.
Yep.
And so, I do think that there's a little bit of a sticky stereotype that I sort of see with it that even older generations are moving away from. Maybe not at the same pace, but we definitely see it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing your thoughts on that piece. So to wrap things up today, Mike, there are obviously many transformative workplaces popping up around the country and the world. What are the transformative practices happening in HR that we have not covered yet today that you see making an impact in 2026 and beyond?
Oh, I mean, I think human resources has been like, in a funny way, like at the front of the AI revolution, because at the end of the day, it's the first time technology is really getting democratized inside companies, inside the enterprise. I was talking to a really strong leader that we've got at TriNet, and she was walking me through her org chart. And on her org chart, she's got 3 separate agents right alongside the people on her team. And she's starting to think about, like what's the work that can get done via AI? And then what's that allow me to do in terms of kind of moving the folks on her team up that kind of value scale? And so, I definitely think AI is transforming work. I think from a workplace, training and development, I think, is moving like very quickly away from, manuals and CBT and instructor-led training. And we sort of saw the first wave of digital, but digital kind of took, the analog and just made it available anywhere. I think that's now moving to where it's like, why would I sit through a presentation of information when I can interact real time? And not only can I do that in dedicated training periods, but I can actually insert that learning into workflow. And so people can kind of actually get into the fun things, which is serving clients, building product, whatever the profession might be. And so much of the learning can actually happen through engagement in the actual workflow. So I think it's a really exciting time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love hearing that perspective on training and development. As somebody who's, heavily in the training and development space, I really like hearing from leaders just to see where their perspective is and kind of what you're seeing in the future. So, Mike, this has been such a great conversation today. Is there anything else you want to leave our listeners and viewers with before we wrap things up?
I would say 2 things. I mean, the first one is just maybe where we started, and there's so much beauty and difference, but let's never forget, that how much that unites us around the common things we all want to accomplish together. And I think as we interact with each other with a little bit of humility and an open mind, it's just kind of remarkable what we can accomplish. So a word of encouragement there. And then 2, to say thank you to you for including me on the podcast, Kamber, but also, that is our purpose here at TriNet is helping people that have a pretty exciting vision of where they want to go and the impact they want to have on the world. And, for somebody to step into it like you did, it's a very cool thing to be included along the way. So thank you for including me.
Thank you, Mike. And shout out for you again, for one, shouting out my book at the beginning. That was great. But two, Mike, for those who are listening and watching, he actually wrote a testimonial that is seen in the book. So if you're interested in checking that out, that was just a huge support. And once again, thank you, Mike, so much. It's been so great to reconnect here.
It's great to talk with you.
And thank you again for joining us on The Great Retention. Before you go, remember this: the generational landscape is shifting, and today's workforce is not the same one we once knew. Our mission at GPS is to help you save time and money by identifying these shifts and demystifying generational differences through our workshops, programs, and workforce planning. Contact us today if you're interested in transforming your multi-generational team, and let's drive your business towards long-term sustainability and success. And if you enjoyed this episode, leave us a rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. This helps others know where to find episodes about this topic. And don't forget to share with your coworkers. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.